About 3 to 4 weeks ago, I was rewatching my favorite anime of all time with my friend and suddenly realized that I've done only two fan art pieces of it. Embarrassed by this thought and whiplashed by the gust of inspiration from a rewatch, I decided to fix my situation and draw something that would express my love for this fandom properly. So here we are. My name is Bjorn and I'm a villain. In today's video, I'm going to yap about my favorite anime slayers and break down how I made a short animation sequence of it as a tribute to its greatness. Slayers was one of the first serialized anime I ever watched. I had recently entered middle school and traveled to stay with my relatives in other city for a summer break. It was a long stay, and throughout its duration, I mostly spent time indoors with my older cousin as we drew, watched anime, and read funny fanfictions online. This was my first long stay in the city, and since I grew up in a small village passing by the cows on my way to school, I hardly understood what internet is. So that stay had me discovering quite a lot. My cousin was older than me and already in high school, so she acted as my mentor during this time. Smart, cool, knowledgeable, and trained in academic drawing, she was the figure I genuinely looked up to. On my first day, we went to the city and she and her parents were showing me around. We were walking around the city center when my cousin exclaimed that she needed to visit an art supplies shop to buy a new pack of watercolor paint. So down the street we went. In a cramped yet spacious shop, there was a blooming every artsy kid's paradise. Various kinds of paints you'll never see in your local village shop, over 100 kinds of pens and pencils, inks and canvases. I've never seen canvases before. I was so amused and overwhelmed that I didn't dare to touch anything because I was scared to fumble it with my clumsy hands. Instead, I just stood there beside my cousin awkwardly and rotated my head at all 360 degrees in a silent awe. I didn't know better and was too shy to separate to explore, so when it was time to check out, I only grabbed an album, though my cousin was generous enough to buy me anything I liked. On the way to the cashier was a long line, and I got distracted by observing all cool, colorful books on the shelves when one particular cover caught my eye. It had an anime girl on it, and the title was promising that by reading this book, you could become a real manga artist. I can't recall the title now, but I was so impressed that I pleaded with my cousin to reach it from the shelf for me. Roaming through its pages, we soon discovered that we were both interested in its content and took it home. After dinner, we were left by adults to our own devices and finally had a chance to explore the magical grimoire. We both were avid anime fans, but of course my cousin knew about anime more than me. Unlike her, I didn't have a DVD player at home and discs were rarely making its way to where I lived, so my only anime source were cartoon channels on TV. I had to investigate program schedule for these channels in Dad's newspapers to figure out when the next episode of Shaman King would air, so I didn't miss it. I even learned from my dad how to record TV airing on VHS tapes to rewatch it later, but that wasn't enough to satisfy my hunger for anime consumption. So, when me and my cousin sat down at the table and started to draw, she suggested we put a DVD on while we drew. I didn't mind as I was too busy inspecting the first chapter of a very thick manga artist manual. I looked at it as if it was my new holy grail, so I didn't care what DVD she was inserting into the player. Finally, she sat down next to me, clicked the remote, and it happened. I lifted my head, breaking my concentration, and saw some map on the screen. The title, engulfed in flames, flared before my eyes, and the music took my whole attention. I felt a gust of energy in my limbs and excitement as an unfamiliar voice called for my attention. That voice was the voice of one and only Lina Inverse. I put my pencil down and I didn't pick it up until it was dark behind the windows and my aunt urged us to go to bed. Lina Inverse was funny, strong, versatile hero. She had a strong character, could kick an ass, and most of all, she was very human. She was not a typical damsel in distress or a perfectly naive and cute female protagonist. Oh no, she was everything I ever wanted to see in a character. She made mistakes, got embarrassed easily, fumbled this and that, and couldn't always win, but came out victorious most of the time. For me, she became an icon that I aspired to be, and partially because of that, I started to be more open and outgoing than I was before. I started watching Slayers from season 1 and never got over it. I scrambled all my pocket money to buy a new Slayers DVD whenever me and my mom traveled to a nearby city to get me dressed for a new school semester. Tired and panting after an exhausting shopping spree, I hurriedly walked into one of the three big DVD stores that were so conveniently placed right in front of a huge parking lot where we were awaiting our bus home. I browsed through countless DVDs while my mom was looking for the bus outside until I finally put my hands on Slayers or Pokemon. Slayers were hard to find in a wide array of anime discs, and the clerks weren't familiar with it, so it took me quite a few trips to the city to finally collect all three seasons. Since it was a hard and long awaited achievement, I cherished those DVDs like a treasure. I can't recall now if me and my cousin finished the whole first season during my stay, but I remember how deeply I was impressed with Slayers. Only a kid can obsess over an anime the way I became obsessed with it. This show had me in a chokehold. It had a simple yet entertaining plot. The narrative was easy to follow, and yet it never failed to be funny and full of surprises. I eagerly awaited for any chance to spend my time watching the next episode and was utterly disappointed to finish one. I begged my parents for a DVD player just so I could watch this show because I couldn't find VHS tapes of it in the stores. It really helped that VHS tapes were going out of fashion in a rapid manner, so I didn't have to wait long. Slayers is a large part of my childhood, and it's a fandom that's forever holding a place in my heart. The adventures, the drift, the humor, I love every aspect of it. Except seasons 4 and 5, those are out of the equation, don't talk to me about them. I love every season of Slayers, but my favorite characters make appearances only in two of them. Those are my giddy crush Zealous and my forever first love, Valgarv. I'm ought to pay my tributes to them in form of fan art some more. I truly don't draw enough. Actually, my first anime illustration that I took seriously and worked really hard on was an illustration of Zealous, Valgarv, and Philia. I drew this on my very first Wacom bamboo that had a neon green backplate. It came with a Clip Studio license, and that's what got me into digital drawing. I stopped drawing on paper the moment I got familiar with using that tablet. If you ask me draw anything on paper now, I won't be able to. I can't stand it. The sound of graphite against the paper irritates me to no end, but somehow scribbling on a Cintiq is totally fine. I can't explain it. So far, I only drew two Slayers fanarts, and both hold a huge significance for my artistic journey. If the trio illustration was the first I really put my efforts and heart into, the second with Volgov was the one that I worked on with great passion and spent 2 whole weeks on. It was after Volgov when I decided to draw proper backgrounds for all my illustrations. Before that, I didn't really care about character surroundings, but because I loved Volgov so much, I poured my all into drawing a proper backdrop for him. It wasn't even to improve my skills or prove anything. I did it purely because it's Valgarv. I can't fumble it for him. He deserves to look cool. I thought of him and drew until I couldn't bear to handle the pain in my right arm. I was willing to endure it because it was an art of my favorite character from an anime I truly love. So I did. Episodes about a transgender dragon, fake wedding, and Amelia and Phil's first appearance are my favorite from the first season. Also, Amelia's blunt remark about how shady the goddess looks will never not be funny to me. One of the noteworthy episodes is the one when Lina and Gary get captured and Lina gets electrocuted every time she tries to cast a spell. In season 2, I like the episode about a magiker who turns people into dolls, episode about hunting a dragon to taste the dragon's delicacies, and the one in which Auntie Aqua goes against Golf. Battle against Fibrizzo is really cool. I liked it a lot. My favorite moments were when the company used Dell as an anchor and when Amelia figured out that singing positive songs can make Zella sick. It's kinda hard to pinpoint my favorite episodes from season 3 because I liked every episode if only Volgov made appearance in it, no matter how long. I think my favorites are the ones where Slayers battle against him, all of them, especially the final battle. It was the most epic out of all 3 seasons, and it's my top favorite battle of all series, period. Overall, Slayers is the fandom that I hold dear to my soul, and I can't imagine my life without it. I rewatch it whenever I get sad, and it never fails to cheer me up and brighten my day. I love it. I don't really know what to say. When I sat down to write this script, the title was Slayers Were a Comedic Masterpiece. But it just so happened that I wrote something entirely different instead. I don't know why, but as soon as I typed my first sentence, the words just started pouring out, and I struggled to type fast enough to keep up with the swarm of endearing thoughts. I'm not sure how many people are gonna watch this video because it's quite boring and sentimental, very personal piece of content. But if you like Slayers as much as I do, I want you to know that you are not alone and this fandom is not forgotten. Okay, now let's get down to business. As you can see, this sequence consists of 4 cuts in total and is running on 24 frames per second rate. The frame gap rate is 3, which means that there is a new frame every third frame. I don't know what I thought while layering this project like this, but for some reason I thought that it was a good idea to break the whole animation down to body parts. So I animated hands separately, body separately, skirt and cloak separately, and hair separately, all in different animation folders. I separated everything like I was a chainsaw man on a mission. I don't know why I thought this was a good idea, but it definitely wasn't because I had a really hard time reassembling and cutting on intersections. I literally screamed in frustration and audibly cursed out my past self for doing this to me. I am so glad this is over. I think if I was wiser with animation folders hierarchy, this wouldn't be this big of an issue. For example, there is a clear reason as to why you would want to separate cloak, hair, and bangs from the rest of the body. Since cloak and hair will be overlaid by body, it makes sense to animate those in a separate folder underneath the body folder. As for the bangs, since they're the part that has to be in the front, they should be put in a folder above the body animation. So, 3 folders in total, no need for more. In fact, I think this is how I'm gonna do this for my next animation. Prior to making this, I was watching a lot of tutorials on how to use Clip Studio for animation, and most of them recommended to draw bright red or neon green lines to accentuate where would the shadows and highlights go. But none said as to why exactly you should do this. Yes, they explained that this is the way Japanese studios do this, but not why you gotta line your shadows first instead of applying them like you do with illustrations. Basically, there was no explanation to why you shouldn't treat your animation like you do your illustration. So my arrogant know it all ass thought, but why? Like, why though? I bet I can do that. And so I did. And then I failed. Well, semi failed, because I still like the final result, duh. So, what was my mistake, and why shouldn't you treat your animation like it's another illustration? Besides the obvious point that illustrations usually have a considerably larger amount of layers and are more complex and detailed, and therefore they're exponentially harder to animate properly because you probably gotta animate every damn layer separately. Besides that, usually when dealing with drawing a regular art, you keep the base colors and shading on separate layers, or at least I do. So I have my line art, color based, shadows, and highlights layers, which is roughly 4 layers in total. It's not too much and generally okay, right? Bitch, wrong! This does not work well for animation because while animating, you're enabling an onion skin, and onion skin can make it really hard to figure out which shadow belongs to where and on top of which color. If you keep your shadows on a separate layer, like I did, it's hard to keep with every single shadow. Perhaps if your shading is less complicated than mine, this could work, but I would not recommend you do this. I broke my last brain cell spine trying to compute which shadow gap belongs where, and my brain is smoother than a baby's ass at this point. I could feel it boil. To make this easier, just line out your shadows and highlights on your line art layer and fill them in on the same layer as your color base. Spare yourself some coffee time. You deserve it. Okay? This will also result in your CSP file being lighter size, so you're in for a win. That was such a lame line. Anyways, now to the compositing. For the compositing, I use DaVinci Resolve because it's free and I hate subscriptions. First, in CSP, I disabled a paper layer and exported my animation as a PNG image sequence. I was too lazy to draw proper background and grew impatient to get this over with. So I just went and grabbed the backgrounds from my previous works. The first one I got from my Devilman fan art and the second one from the Witch one. I'm really happy that I drew those bags properly so I can reuse them in cases like this. I am really proud of myself for that. Can you hear this sound? I'm patting myself on the back right now. Did you actually believe that? My mic wouldn't pick that up. I'm actually patting myself on the chest. Can you hear how hollow that sounds? This sound signifies how I grew up to be quite similar to my forever icon, Lina Inverse. Flat chested. Okay, so this is how our project looks like in DaVinci Resolve. It's nothing fancy really. So on our upper layers, we have our imported animation sequence and we have the same sequence copy pasted but reversed so that the animation is playing backwards. Now on our lower layers we have our backgrounds, background number 1 and background number 2, and on our middle layers we have the same backgrounds but with effects applied to them. So what did I do in DaVinci that I was too lazy to achieve in Clip Studio? Mainly, I worked with our backgrounds and I'm going to disable our animation sequence S so it is easier to observe the modifications I did to the backgrounds. Okay, so first of all, we're going to disable our middle layers as well and play our sequence. So, on the background number 1, the main thing I did, I keyframed frame number 1 to the last frame here, and you can see the numbers on the zoom section in the transform to run as I am playing it out. So I keyframed the beginning at this position to this position so that it's zooming in. And I applied the same zooming in attribute to the background number 2 and retimed it so that it's zooming out. In between these two backgrounds, I used a cross-dissolve transition. I did not do any modifications to it, I just stretched it so it will last longer. And that's basically it for the first layer. Now, I also used the same transition in between the backgrounds on our middle layer. So really nothing complicated. We're going to enable this layer now. Okay, so as you can see, this is a copy of a background that we have underneath. But if you scroll down its attributes, you can see that we have a color burn effect applied to it in a composite mode section. So what does it mean? Color burn effect in DaVinci Resolve works exactly the same how it does in Clip Studio Paint. It does make your illustration darker. It works exactly the way the name of this effect implies it would. It makes the image look kind of burnt out. So this is what I did. I just timed it. How exactly? So as we're zooming in, you can see keyframes being activated here in the opacity. Let me show you. So because color burn mode makes your image darker, I timed my opacity from 0 to 76%. I didn't go all the way to the 100 because it didn't look good, but I do like the way it looks at 76%. Let me play it out again. So we go from here to here. And you can see here that there is a shadow doubling in these areas, but as the animation plays out, the main focus stays on the character, so it's not really noticeable. And I kind of ditched the idea of making it perfect because I am planning to make a proper background for this animation as I'm going to progress on it. So I didn't pay enough attention to the artifacts like this. So this is what we did with the background number 1. And for the background number 2, we did the same color burn effect, but we again retimed it and made it go from the darker opacity to the lighter opacity, like this. Pretty easy, isn't it? And now we go to our animation sequence. So I'm going to disable our backgrounds and enable only our higher layers. As you can see, the animation sequence itself doesn't have any background because, remember, we disabled our paper layer before exporting it as an image sequence. So this is how it looks like without any background. Very neat. The main thing that I did to the animation sequence was adding this red lighting. At first, I didn't plan on adding any special effects to the animation. I thought the sequence was alright as it is. But since I was bound to make on compositing anyways, I just figured I might slap something simple on top and call it a day. So that's what I did. Okay, first of all, we're going to scroll up the sequence attributes and go into the effects section. Here we have our light rays effect applied to it. And you can find it here in Open Effects and just scroll it down. Here you can see all the settings for my light rays effect. I'm gonna maximize the window. What I did mainly was to change the light rays color to red. By default, it's usually white. So I changed it to red and I keyframed the length, soften and brightness. As a composite style, I chose Add. It works the same way as Clip Studio's Add layers. And that's basically it. So as the animation plays out, you can see how our length, soften and brightness settings kind of change their numbers. I just randomly played with those and I didn't do anything complicated. I just intuitively put in the numbers, played it out, and stopped and keyframed the moments where I thought that the lighting looked cute. This is basically it. I didn't do much. This is how it looks like. You can kind of see how the light travels from the amulets down to her legs and kind of works from underneath from there. Yeah, I just did everything intuitively. Not a single thought, not a single brain cell activated. I just did everything as I went and I didn't pay much attention. I just thought, okay, I kinda like that, and I ran with that. So after that, I went into a render mode and exported the sequence as a YouTube 1080 pixels video in MP4 format, codec H264, standard HD resolution and frame rate 24. And then I added it to the render queue and rendered it. And that's basically it. That would be all I wanted to say for this video. Thank you so much for watching and listening to my rambling. I hope that you found this at least somewhat helpful or entertaining. If you have anything to comment or add to a conversation, please do so in the comment section below. My name is Björn and I'm a villain. I'll see you around. Bye!